Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well. I hope that you've had a great Sunday. I am tired as hell. I did a lot of yard work today, and we're going to be joined in a couple minutes. Actually, we're going to be joined very soon by Just My Stupid Opinion. I thought I would start. He said he needed um, a little lead time, so I'm going to invite him. A second. So we're going to get him on, and I'm going to switch cameras. Now, there are a lot of topics to talk about today. Of course, there is the one that everyone is talking about, the red hen incident. Has to be, in my opinion, one of the funniest situations I've seen in a while. So we're gonna see if we can get Just My Stupid Opinion. He just messaged me to log him in. I'm gonna drop this camera. I thought we'd get an early start, or not early start, but we would get started while we're waiting for him. But let me see what's going on with him. Unavailable. So anyway, there's a lot to talk about today. There's a lot going on with Mexico. Obviously, they're having an election in about a week. It's going to be probably a guy named AMLO getting through. His name's Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. He's a veteran politician in Mexico, far left politician. I think that one of the reasons that he's going to be elected is that he's been shafted a few times, and he actually deserved to win a couple times. If you really believe in democracy, I believe it was in 2006, he was the candidate that was screwed out of the presidency. In 2012, I think it was a little less close, but also people were saying, votes were bought by the government. And, I think that it does undermine the confidence in democracy when you have people. It doesn't matter the fact that he's a far left activist. You have to, if you want to have a vote, and you might as well have a free vote. You shouldn't have a vote that's basically determined by political expediency. Let me see who's here in the meantime.
Hey.
What's up? So we have Just My Stupid Opinion here from the Great White North, right? And we're going to discuss a few topics today. Of course, I do want to thank Adrian. Yesterday, I should mention he had an interview about the Mattis file on Tom Benson's channel. So I hope you guys check it out. I will, maybe I'll add it later, unless Adrian, if you want to send me the link, I can add it to the chat. But
yes. Yeah, I can do that.
But the fact is that was a very it was a very well organized one. There were a couple things that I probably would say, like a couple details that I would say were a bit off, but other than that, I want to commend him on representing for the project, and I want anybody who's out there watching, I hope that you start to disseminate this news as much as you can, because we're really combating a type of media conglomerate, or multiple media conglomerates, that think that they can basically get away with whatever the hell they want. And, without people doing that due diligence and basically fighting, using their skills of investigatory skills or critical thinking skills, I don't think that we would be able to actually, we won't be able to actually have a free society anymore. Not in my country, and not in Adrian's country, which is, of course, Canada. But today we're going to be talking a little about the best country in North America. That would be Mexico, of course, right, Adrian? Mexico is incontrovertibly, it is the best country in North America. Have you heard a little about that election that they have going on?
Not too much actually. I've been a little bit out of the loop of what's going on in the world the last few days.
Yeah,
But
what's been happening is so they have a what the hell happened to my camera, by the way? I should is there a way to flip your camera around?
good question.
Yeah, they can barely see my face. Here, I have to move to the left here. You know how we don't approve of moving to the left on this channel, but speaking of
I
which,
like it.
the nation of Mexico is going to move to the left soon. It's almost a certainty that on July 1st they're going to elect Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, who is a veteran politician over there in Mexico. And what he will bring will probably, if he fulfills his vision, will bring ruin to the nation of Mexico and probably, uh, erase any sort of big economy that they've had since NAFTA, which is ironic because NAFTA was supposed to be what would bring great prosperity to Mexico. Instead, unfortunately, it hasn't fulfilled the vision of a better economy for any of the three countries that are a party to it. Not for the U.S., not for Mexico. I don't know about Canada so much because we don't talk a lot about the effect of NAFTA on Canada. So what's the sentiment up there, given that trade talks are at an impasse? Obviously, Justin Trudeau apparently he did have a public opinion bump for I think a brief period after the G7, but what's been happening since then?
Well, sentiment in Canada got a little. There was a bump in his support after the whole G7 incident because it seemed like he was standing up to Trump. I think that's starting to wear off again. I think last time I checked it, the Conservatives were back to at least tied with Trudeau. So that's starting to wear off after all that, and now there's been a bit of a push. Like people who are pissed off. It's all being pushed by the media, so take it with a grain of salt how many really feel this way. But they're talking about now that people should buy Canadian products instead of American. Like some Canadian producers have been starting to put like made in Canada stickers and stamps on their products so that way people know. Um, Although, actually, a little bit funny about that was that we were misled by Mr. Trudeau, actually, because he came out in that press conference when everything went tits up, when he came out and sort of said about Trump, he's like, we're not going to be pushed around and everything like that. At no point were we told that Trump actually did make concessions when it came to NAFTA. They were saying that the sunset clause was supposed to be a red line for our trade negotiators, and then we were uninformed that Trump actually conceded that point to us, and then as far as we heard, it was kind of like Trump was not willing to negotiate, got on his plane, went, and then Trudeau came out and said that he was that we weren't going to get pushed around, but nobody ever brought up the fact that he was that Trump was actually willing to meet them part way on what he wanted. So that was a little bit of a piss off. And all you have to do is really look at who's negotiating NAFTA, and this is not going to go well for us because though our minister who's negotiating the trade, Christine or Krista, I can't remember, Krista Freeland. There was an interview with her where she pretty much said that she was talking about some of her. She's got a couple of the people she deals with in Europe or trade. They call themselves sisters in trade, and how sometimes they sign their stuff with a little smiley face when things are going a little rough for them. So that to me was just kind of a little bit of a cringeworthy moment. So yeah, things are not going so well up here, but it's mostly because we can't come to a concession with NAFTA, which should be a lot easier than it actually is. But one of the main things that ended up happening is bringing Mexico into it. Is Trump first took sites of when it came to NAFTA, he first took sites in Mexico, and that was really where his main beef was coming from. But Justin Trudeau decided to take this time that he was going to stand next in Mexico instead of just working out any issues he had with Trump directly. So he took a protectionist stance against Mexico about we need to stand with Mexico, and because of it, now Trump has finally turned his sights back on to Canada. He put the tariffs on aluminum and the steel industry, and then he's looking at the auto industry. So things have been a little rough up here at the moment, and it's mostly just due to bad leadership. I mean, a lot of I kind of last time I was kind of talking about, I said, like, if we're kind of getting into a little bit of a trade war, a little bit of a bitch fight, I got to stand with my country. But I was very pissed off when I found out that Trump had conceded on the sunset clause, which to me wasn't even a big deal because I don't see why it's such a bad thing to have a sunset clause for like every good trade deal. Every negotiation has to have some point where it needs to be renegotiated. So it wasn't actually a big deal for me. So right now, I think this the whole NAFTA situation should have been resolved a long time ago, but it's just Justin Trudeau uses Trump as to make himself look better because it's weird. A lot of our media also takes a lot of aim at Trump, but and they ignore a lot of the other stuff that goes on up here. So I find that Trudeau just likes to use your president as a human shield to try and avoid as much criticism and as much bad press as possible. And he did this, and when this whole thing was going on, because you guys have had the big thing going on with immigration and children getting separated from their parents right now, Trudeau did for the little first week did the smart thing and
Wait,
just
so
kept his mouth shut.
can I cut you off for a second because
Oh,
we're not
yep.
getting good stream health, so I think I'm going to stop the stream and restart it because it just
Okay.
doesn't seem. So I'll cut it. You can stay on the line with me. It's just I see I'm getting bad stream health. So
Sounds
hold
good.
on.
Okay.
Let's see here. Uh, all right, we've resumed and the stream health looks better. So
Awesome.
let me see. Yeah, I wonder if they got notifications though. Anyway, keep going. So we were just talking. I don't know if the video is going to restart at the beginning, but we were just talking with Just My Stupid Opinion, Adrian Lloyd, who, by the way, did an interview yesterday with Tom Binns on his show concerning the Mattis file. But we were just talking a little about the tariff war with Canada and the U.S., and now Mexico is about to very likely, barring unforeseen circumstances, like an asteroid hitting Mexico, they're probably going to be electing Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, or AMLO as he's called. He's probably going to be the new president of Mexico, which, good for him because he got shafted in 2006, apparently. But bad for Mexico because he's probably going to be doubling the minimum wage, which you might think good thing for the Mexican people. Well, in that case, why would manufacturers want to go down there? It's just simple economics. But
Well,
I'll let you continue your stream of thought, Adrian.
Well, while we're talking about the minimum wage, I'll just say from personal experience that in the beginning of 2018, I think it was January 1st, they raised the minimum wage here from $11.25 an hour, I think, upwards to $14 an hour. And as soon as that happened, the job prospects went in the shitter. There was like next to nobody was hiring. It was mostly part-time work. And suddenly the requirements in order to get a job became significantly higher than they were before. Like one time I tried applying for a job at Walmart and I had to take, and they wanted like to know all this personal information about me, which I never had to do before. Significantly higher than they were before. Like in the past, I literally just filled out an application form and I didn't even need to hand them a resume. So raising the minimum wage is not necessarily a good thing. So yeah, what I was saying about the whole trade wars is that Trudeau did get a bit of a bump in the polls when it seemed like he was standing up to Trump. It's been a little difficult because we've had our economy has taken a little bit of a hit because of it. I think it's contracted a little bit. But what I was also saying was we were actually misled by our government because our government was saying that Trump was being completely unfair at the G7, and then about a week or two after everything went down, we found out that oh crap. Oh, we found out that it turns out that Trump did give concession. He met us halfway because the Canadian government was saying that the sunset clause about having to renegotiate every 5 years was a hard line for them. It turns out that Trump at the G7 was willing to concede that to us, but that was never brought up in Trudeau's press conference when he came out and said that we're not going to be pushed around by Trump or America. So that was a really big piss off. Trudeau did get a little bit of bump in the ratings, but then I think that's more or less died off now. And Trudeau just seems to use a lot of it as he uses Trump pretty much as a human shield. He tries to direct as much attention to what's going on in the States to try, and our media for some reason likes to report a lot of what Trump is doing. I don't know why, because they let a lot of information go up here whenever there's a scandal or something going on, whether there's some bad publicity for Justin. It seems that they always find some way to report on something that Trump is doing. And with everything that's been going on in America right now between the immigration, the whole parents getting separated from their children, Trudeau did the smart thing for maybe the first week, which was keep his mouth shut, especially because, again, with the how NAFTA negotiations have really hit a boiling point. But then he came out a few days ago where he was like condemning Trump for everything that was going on. Turns out that it's no better up here when we're talking about that, because there's plenty of situations where children are separated from their parents as well. In fact, Canada, on a rating of 100, we actually got a 49 out of 100. So technically, we got a failing grade when it came to that sort of thing. And that was actually important because Trudeau ended up saying that this sort of thing would never happen in Canada. Turns out it does. And we're talking about sometimes these kids are getting put into I'm trying to remember the report. I think you were saying the kids may have even spent some time in federal penitentiary. Not that they were like put in prison, but that's where they were stationed for a while, or maybe they were talking about the parents. But point is, it's not much better up here. But people don't give the full story when talking about that. There's plenty of reasons why these children could be separated from their parents. I mean, if the parents don't come with proper paperwork, there's no way to prove that it's actually their kid. How do you know it's not somebody that snatched up someone's kid somewhere and then tried to cross the border while using them as a defense? So yeah, everything's been a little rough up here over the last few weeks, though. I guess getting back on my main point, Mexico is not going in a good way if they're going to elect this this guy right now, because I don't know why they're not taking lessons from their neighbors to the south. I mean, we just need to look at Brazil. We just need to look at we have Venezuela down there. I think Nicaragua is going through something similar at the moment. So, but apparently Mexico is going to go along the same way, elect a left-wing government, and then that's just going to bite them in the ass later. It's not going to go over well, especially when it comes to they're also renegotiating NAFTA, which isn't going to go so well because Trump's not really good. They're not going to see eye to eye on a lot of the same issues.
Yeah, I want to welcome the people in the audience. We have already a question from Ryu Shiska, who's asking, "What level Jew are you?" I would say, I did beat Sonic the Hedgehog, so I would say I'm a gold member. So, I'm pretty high up there, but I have a ways to go. There's a few other new expansion packs on the Sonic the Hedgehog that I haven't fulfilled. So I have much to fulfill in the world of Judaism. If that answers his question, it's a kind of strange question, so I'm just going to give it a strange answer.
What level of G?
Jew.
Oh, Jew. What level of Jew? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what he means. Maybe he means what denomination. But yeah, we're just getting. It's been like a funky stream because only now. I want to hear from the audience. When did you guys get a notification just now? Because we've been on for probably like a good while. And again, I'd like to tell you guys, for those of you that don't know, please send me the link, by the way, Jim, so because I don't have it at the moment. He was just on yesterday with Tom Binns concerning.
Drop that in the Discord.
Okay, so let me see. So we have a story that both me and our friend Jim So have been involved in, and basically that concerns the Mattis file, which we're probably gonna have to come up with a more catchy nickname eventually. And I have a few nicknames, and I'll consult with Jim So later about it. But he did an interview on it with Tom Binns, and you should check it out. A couple details were just a little off. For example, saying that the Intercept, Ryan Grimm was with the Intercept when he wrote the story. It was actually the Huffington Post, but he does work for the Intercept now, so it's not completely inaccurate. And I think Adrian did
Just
a
I had my timeline a little off. I think that was really the main problem.
yeah. Other than that, I believe yeah. And there was another one, just saying which month we started. But yeah. Other than that, he did a fantastic job. So please check out that video. Check out Tom's channel, by the way. I don't get to interact much with Tom because I think our schedules don't really interact. But so we're talking a little about Mexico, Canada, the rest of Latin America today. And I'm gonna get back to Trudeau later because I got into an argument with somebody, ended up blocking me last week about Canada, and really was kind of a disappointment. And can't reveal too many details because you know better not to burn bridges when they're already completely shelled out. But essentially, what's going on is that the president of, or the future president of Mexico, in all likelihood, is a man named Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. And you can see, one second, let me minimize this OBS. You can see this cartoon here. You see the four main candidates. Well, it's not really four anymore because one of them seems to Jaime Rodriguez, and I haven't followed this very closely. But you have basically this is Anaya, who is the right wing candidate, not gonna do very well. And then you have the PRI, which is you can see my cursor. That's like the real establishment party, if you will. And then you have in the middle, you have Lopez Obrador. So those are the main parties this year in Mexico. But apparently, in the last few polls, Mr. Lopez Obrador is basically just destroying them, kind of like you know, kind of the way that Tom Brady used to destroy the Jets. Used to. I mean, they probably never could beat him anyway. I mean, let's be honest. So why is it that Mexico is turning towards socialism? And that's a question that Mr. Adrian Lloyd already posed. Well, the answer is a lot of these countries do turn towards socialism because of long-term corruption in their system, especially in some of these like so-called democratic countries. You can see, for example, in Italy, left-wing politics is very popular, or was very popular until very recently, when they actually got, some people with brains at the top, who basically destroyed. I mean, leftism will probably take at least 5 or 6 years to regenerate itself in Italy because of the new anti-immigrant wave and the populism over there. And it's not much of there is a party over there that swept into power, the Five Star Movement, that is basically I would say, even further than center left party in terms of economics. They're just very anti-immigrant and anti-European Union. So I think the motivation, and it was the same motivation here in the United States, and you can't throw people like this under the bus. People wanted to vote for Bernie Sanders, for example, or for Ralph Nader when I was a kid because of transparent corruption, the lack of transparency in the political system, and then transparent corruption of the mainstream political parties. So, for what it's worth, Lopez Obrador represents an alternative to the Institutional Revolutionary Party, the PRI of Mexico. That they ruled Mexico almost unchallenged for about 60 years, and then they gave over most of the power to the right wing party, the National Action Party, which was mildly better in some ways, but it was basically like the same shit but different diet, I guess. And then now they want like the real deal. They want like a higher wage. They want all these protections and whatever. And he really said something. He said today, or I think it was yesterday. He said that it's basically a human right to migrate to the United States. He says,
Who's
and
he
today,
to
what's that?
Who's he to decide that? He's not an American. That's not his country. He can't make that decision for the entire other country.
No, I mean he's riffing off of Bernie, who said that healthcare is a human right. I mean, according to who?
Everything's a human right these days.
So he says,
Ex-
and now very soon, very, very soon, once our movement triumphs, we are going to defend the migrants of the entire American continent and all the migrants of the world that, of necessity, must abandon their towns and villages to find a life in the United States, a human right that we are going to defend, he said. And I can play the video if you want, although I would have to freely translate for our, the majority of our audience probably doesn't speak Spanish. You don't speak Spanish, do you, Adrian? You might.
No, no, I don't. I understand a little bit of it because I speak French as well, and there's some overlap there. But no, I don't speak Spanish.
Right. We usually have who do we have? I mean, Carlos speaks Spanish, obviously, but the thing is, I don't care, obviously, if people want to come to the United States, but the fact of the matter is that, like, I did not think during the election in 2016 that immigration was going to be the top topic, and I was wrong. I thought that the real problem, and my problem, was Obamacare. I thought Obamacare was the biggest disgrace in terms of civil policy in the history of our country, domestic policy. And nobody cared besides I would say Obamacare was not the biggest. It was obviously much less than immigration a big topic. And I was doing a lot of videos on Obamacare where I was explaining, this, if we allow this to continue, you're basically going to be, the United States will be basically the piggy bank of insurance companies. And I said, I was making videos, I was saying, and this is true. This wasn't some gimmick. I was saying, when you have, the United States basically subsidizing the insurance industry, it's bad for progressives and it's bad for conservatives. But people were not listening to that type of, obviously also because I was a new creator. By the time of the election, I probably had 2 videos. And both of them were about actual election issues, like where, predictions and stuff like that. So it really came as a surprise to me that immigration became a major issue. And now that it's, I've gone through a political maturation, other people have gone through it. It's obvious that there is a problem where people expect the United States of America to accept all of the poor that they themselves cannot care for. And therefore, my question to Mr. Lopez Obrador, with all due respect, and I respect the will of the Mexican people. I'm not going to tell them who to vote for. But if you're going to be president of Mexico, it's your job to look after the people of Mexico. It's not your job to tell, people that are residents of your country, citizens of your country, it's better for you to seek a better life in a different country, whether it's the United States or whether it's let's say, Jamaica.
No, absolutely. I mean, though this has actually been some of my beef with this whole immigration thing is like people just have this assumption that you can come into these wealthy countries with, and it's almost like expected that they have to do something to take care of you, when really the whole point is that the government isn't taking care of their own people. And running away from the problem isn't going to solve anything. In fact, like these are the sort of people who need to stay behind and enact a change in their own countries, because otherwise they're just leaving other people to suffer through the same thing. And personally, I don't think that an economic situation is enough to actually claim asylum in someone else's country. Usually the whole idea of asylum was that you were being persecuted in your own country unfairly and you couldn't stay there because you were at risk for whether it was your life or your family's life. So these were reasons in the past on why you couldn't, why people would go to another country seeking asylum. But this is what I've noticed, and whether it has to be the U.S. border or what we're going through now, but right now, because we're also having our own immigration crisis where we're having like people like Haitians and Nigerians and plenty others who are residing in America. We're also crossing our borders now. But really, like, they're not making any real claims of persecution. It's like, even they're saying something like, well, gang violence. It's like, well, every country has gang violence. And I know that, like, especially like maybe Mexico or even farther south from there, they have a lot of bad gang violence that goes on over there. But to me, that's not enough. Usually your life has to be in immediate danger. Like something like what's going on in Syria, like the Syrian refugees, that is more understandable because it's a war zone. Or maybe what's going on in Yemen, that would be more acceptable. That would be more understanding. But these people who just are in a bad situation, it's like, oh, you know what, the jobs just aren't good enough for us, so we're going to go to America. Like, it's unacceptable. I mean, there was a story a while ago where it was like a girl who I think she ended up trying to run from the border guards or something like that on the southern American border, and she ended up getting like shot and killed. But the whole reason she left was simply because she wanted a better job in another country. And I mean, I hate to see something like that, like a poor young girl who is like has her entire life ahead of her. I hate to see her getting shot and killed like that. But it like you just that's not enough reason to just go into someone else's country illegally and claim asylum. That's where legal immigration comes into play, you know. And whenever you're doing this, you're actually it's more unfair for anybody who takes the time and the effort in order to go through the legal immigration process, because the people come in, then they get access to a lot of government funded, whether that's healthcare or service or what other services that is offered. But meanwhile, plenty of other people have paid their way to be there and may not have access to the same services yet. But that's not fair on them.
So I want to say at this moment, it's possible we don't have it confirmed, but tomorrow I might have a debate on Halsey News with a certain
Oh, really?
guy.
Eh?
Yeah, this douche that he's all about. Oh, you shouldn't talk about Nicaragua because we fucked them up in the '80s. I'm like, okay, we fucked up half of the world in the past century, and we talk about them all the time. And also, go fuck yourself. I'll talk about whoever I want. You know, I mean, no, this was. I mean, I don't know if you remember. There was a time I called Jamarl Thomas, who
Yeah.
I have differences with Jamarl Thomas that are as different as can be, like in every respect. But he does he does hear people talk, and he did give me plenty of time.
Was that
But
the time you almost got into you were getting in the argument with them?
yeah, I mean, yes, we were in. I mean, it was an argument, and I was like, I basically was telling him, my peace of mind about Abby Martin. I mean, he doesn't have to listen to me. I don't call his show every day, but I was like ready to tell him, you're basically listening to a propagandist. So then I started, a tweet war with him, and one of his followers starts white knighting him. So it's possible we're going to talk to him tomorrow on Halsey News Network. Now, don't be alarmed when you see this person. He might be of the type of you might need, let's just say he might need a wide angle lens. Okay. So, and that's, I mean, I'm no Callista Flockhart myself, but this guy has like a lot of nerve telling me not to talk about Nicaragua. I mean, I'll talk about countries that don't exist if you want to make that. I mean, you want me to talk about Narnia or something? You want me to talk about problems in countries that don't exist? What's that place in South Park? Imagination Land. Um, it's ridiculous, and I'm not telling him not to have an opinion on it, but then my my issue with Jamarl Thomas, and he can talk. I mean, he has an opinion on the Gaza Strip, an opinion that I disagree with a lot. I think he should be able to express it. I believe in freedom of speech. I'm against these anti-BDS bills in the U.S. I think that they're an abridgment of freedom of speech here. I'm also against the BDS movement because they try to, de facto abridge other people's freedom of speech. They do the deplatforming. But when I called him up, I said, the fact of the matter is that you have more casualties from violence in Nicaragua in a shorter period of time than in the Gaza Strip. And it's not even a state of war. The fact of the matter is, between the Gaza Strip and the Israeli government, you do have a state of war. You can take sides in the war, but you have to agree that there is one. And or if not a war, then some sort of chaotic issue, or some sort of hostility. They don't have an established peace. I mean, we should all agree on that. If you can't agree on that, you're not even looking at the actual game. So I said, well, compare that to Nicaragua, which is not at war, where you're basically seeing people shot in the street, going to, people who are university students who are being shot over Social Security and a income tax increase. And there's more people dying there than are being killed in the Gaza Strip, and Jamal would not acknowledge it. He started talking a lot about some special relationship, and then a degenerate. I mean, I don't know if you heard the call because I did record it, and I
Yeah, I
said
did end up hearing it.
Pakistan, and it devolved from there. But I'm going to keep talking about Nicaragua, and whenever I see somebody mentioning Nicaragua on YouTube, I put a comment there. Good for you, because it should be covered a little more. Nicaragua is closer to our country than anything over there in the Middle East, and it is the poorest country in Central America. It is. Like I did the numbers, and I have a video up from Friday about it. But we're going to deal with, the violence today. The fact is that a child was murdered. A 1-year-old child was murdered in a police action. This was not a murder. The people were waving around the child that I'll get the photo soon. But there was a child that was killed in the Gaza Strip who
The
was
one by the
brought.
gas?
The what?
The one with the gas?
Yeah, they said that it was because of the gas. Now I'm hearing people have clarified that she had some sort of rare blood condition or something. So there's a bit of fuzziness regarding that incident. Obviously, to encourage the loss of life would probably be a bad move, because then you invite more hostility on yourself. I mean, I think we can agree on that. So nobody wants there to be more loss of life in the Gaza Strip, except, in my opinion, the people who foment the protests. I believe that that's their goal. And you can believe yourself whatever you want, but the fact of the matter is that they have people, declare their willingness to sacrifice themselves to conquer Jerusalem, and march towards the fence. Those are those are people who, in many cases, do want to be wounded or killed. On the other hand, in
Well, I
Nicaragua, you're not seeing people trying to get killed.
Well, just in terms of what happened with that baby on the Gaza Strip, I didn't actually end up clicking on the article, but the other day when I was browsing Twitter, I ended up seeing like an article by somebody that was saying that apparently the child never was killed, that it was a false flag, like whether it was faked or something like that. But yeah, that's what I ended up hearing last time I heard about that baby.
Well, those things that has happened before, but you never. Let's see here. Dies from serious wounds. I mean, it's gonna be argued over for years what actually happened. Um, it says here, and this is a problem. This is why I can't. So you have the Times of Israel using it, and if you notice, whenever I do a video or something, I try not to use a biased source that is for one side or the other. Because otherwise, I'm not trying to aim my stuff towards an audience of people that already believe in one side or the other. I try to give the best analysis I can based on the experience that I have, and based on what I can deduce from this, what I can deduce from the circumstances. And the fact is that even if you concede the point that this child died in a protest tent, which is what their story is, why is a family bringing their child to a protest tent where people have been dying habitually over a course of weeks? They've been getting killed in violent circumstances, and they've been committing violent acts in order to they talk a lot about disproportionate violence over there, and in reality, it's not. Nobody goes into any sort of game or any sort of contest or any sort of war thinking, how are we going to make this the most fair fight possible? You go in order to win. You play to win. I mean, I hate to bring up the New York Jets again, but you play to win the game, as Herman Edwards said. And people say, "Oh, war isn't a game. You're being inhumane." Well, the mindset is the same thing. You're not trying to lose. You're not trying to give the other side a fair fight. I don't know. Like, I'm getting some sort of question from Ryu. Askable. I don't know how I got this wrench, but yeah, I don't know how he got that wrench either. I don't know who gave him the mod wrench. I don't give it. I don't have it. I actually have a policy where I hardly ever ban people. I banned one guy for spamming me. So I just derailed myself with regards to Nicaragua. So the focus was intended to be Nicaragua, and you see here, this is from La Prensa, which is the main opposition newspaper over there. So it's not a objective source, and I'll admit that. But a 39-year-old woman was killed by gunfire in a neighborhood of Masaya, which is it's a town in Nicaragua that has basically erupted in rebellion and taken, it's basically completely out of the hands of the government. So she was killed this morning. Well, I guess it was Saturday morning, according to Alvaro Leyva, the executive secretary of the Nicaraguan Association for Human Rights. Now, what would my opponent say about this? He would say that these people are probably, paid by, the CIA or the World Bank or the IMF or whatever. I don't give a shit. The fact is that this government in Nicaragua shat the bed, and they're fucked now. They did this whole dirty deal where they wanted to build a canal with the Chinese, and then the Chinese decided, apparently, once they reached a deal with Panama, screw you. And they'd already moved a lot of peasants off the land, and people were getting wounded in riots at the time. This was like over the past 5 years. And now people want to pretend that this is an issue of CIA interference. No, the fact is that certain governments, they seize too much power. They don't know how to let well enough alone. Ryushishka says, imagine all the murders that take place that they don't report about or that they don't know about. Well, that's the unfortunate truth. That not only he brings up a fair point, and I'm sorry that I'm ranting too long, Adrian, because I know that you're sitting there. But the fact is that we could bring up, let's say there were 6,000 people killed in Nicaragua. They would still blame it on the United States, because people who consider themselves progressives on the international front refuse to believe that any country besides the United States can be responsible for the welfare of its own citizens. And unfortunately, they assume, this is what they assume. They assume that I'm for the intervention of the United States in Nicaragua or in Venezuela or in Brazil or in any of these countries, Ecuador or whatever. It's not the case. I don't believe, especially in Venezuela, Nicaragua, there would be no point anyway. But in Venezuela, they're going to be China's bitch. It's an inevitability. China basically owns the fortune of Venezuela for the foreseeable future. The presidents of Venezuela, the past two, Chavez and Maduro, have mortgaged their future to China. They're so far in debt to China that they will never, ever, ever find a way out. And once they default on their debt, China will instruct somebody to take them out, and then we're going to have China 2.0. China with a nice merengue beat. That's going to be Venezuela. And I don't know if merengue. I don't think merengue comes from there. I think it comes from somewhere else in the Caribbean. But you get my point. The issue, it might come from Colombia. But the the issue here is that people want to say, oh, you're criticizing these socialist countries because you're a capitalist, B, you're some sort of CIA shill or something. I criticize the CIA all the time. I say all the time, I don't want there to be a new CIA nominee. I want the CIA to be dissolved, basically. But you can never convince these people, because unless you're one of these people who wants this total Fruit Loop socialism, where basically everybody is tricked out like Toucan Sam in like army fatigues, you must be some sort of Nazi. So that's the feeling that I have, and unfortunately, people do die every day, and nobody gives a shit, and nobody talks about Nicaragua except for a select few people.
Yeah, well, it doesn't suit their. It's probably because it doesn't suit their narrative, which is a big thing when it comes to what would be left wing politics these days. Is that they try as much as possible to ignore any narrative that doesn't fit their idea. like a socialism, and they take every opportunity to criticize capitalism. And I mean, there's plenty of things to criticize when we're coming to capitalism, but they want to point to these areas and try and make them seem like they better like they're better than they really are. I mean, Bernie Sanders was doing this as well because, like, I think it was Denmark. He was saying, like, they've managed to do well as a socialist country, and then Denmark came out and was like, Bernie, stop telling everyone that we're a socialist country. We're a free market society. We just have some more socialized. We're just a little more socialized than other countries. But it didn't seem to matter to him at the time. And then, I mean, the perfect example of this I find is also when we discuss the religion of Islam. It's like they want to make it seem like they'll propagandize. That's a good way to put it. Propagate.
Propagandize.
Yeah, propagandize,
Oh,
propagates the idea that it's
okay.
a religion of peace, completely leaving out like what the situation is in the Middle East. So for me, that's probably I think that's really the main driving force behind why they believe this or why they won't bring this up. It's because of it doesn't fit what their politics. So instead of just admitting that they might be wrong on this or they made a mistake, instead they'll double down and look for any reason to make an excuse for these people. Or at least that's what I think is really the driving force behind their belief system. And I guess that comes from a little more personal experience because I used to be more left wing. So when I kind of see people like that, that was a lot of things that I used to do too, and I thought I was wrong. I didn't like the idea of being wrong. So, you try to double down or try and make your point even more rather than just owning up that you made a mistake. And I found that I don't know what it was. Maybe I'm just tooting my own horn, but I felt like when I started moving a little more right wing, I started like at least being able to admit when I was wrong a lot more. But maybe that was also because I got older or something like that.
Yeah, I think it took me many years. A lot of people get red pilled within a matter of weeks nowadays, and for me, I went from being when I was 16, I was probably more willing to. I couldn't vote yet, so but the presidential election was going on. I probably would have voted for Ralph Nader at the time. It took me until, let's say, 7, 8 years later, when Ron Paul was running for president, to start to really, I'd already decided that that communism was a horrible idea, but to really reject socialism and the welfare system took me much, much longer to realize, that I don't believe in it. And part of it was living in Israel and seeing how, the more successful they became, it was largely because they started privatizing a lot of these state monopolies, such as the phone company, or such as the air carrier. They still have an air carrier that's a national carrier, but they also have a number of other ones. And the fact is, I saw who put this comment earlier. It was Larry Gerke. Thanks for tuning in again. He says, when China takes over them, hopefully Abby Martin will work for Xinhua. Yeah. That's the fact is, I don't know if they would accept somebody who's like so emotionally unhinged as her, but I wouldn't be surprised because the fact is that she works for a country, Venezuela, right now, that their entire economy is based on oil, and yet she's all the time if her Empire Files episodes are not about the Israelis or about the United States. They're about fracking and they're about oil and they're about climate change or whatever. Look, Venezuela is because of the government that pays her, that cuts her checks, is dependent on oil exclusively. That's the only engine driving their economy. And it's unfortunate because they had an economy that was much more diversified. Gerke says she has nice legs, though. Yeah, she is basically, the spawn of Satan, and therefore she's able to conceal herself in a very, I'm gonna go all Alex Jones here. I smell sulfur when I see her on screen. This is the way I think of, and people think I'm joking. I would say that there are very few people who get me more riled up when I'm watching, just bold-faced lies than Abby Martin. The reason is that you could use all the statistics and all of the findings and all of the actual trends and put together your argument, and she'll call it a complete lie. She'll call it a complete lie. And this is why they picked somebody like her, because there are other leftists who go and they shill for Venezuela. There's Caleb Maupin, the sock puppet for RT. And I do like RT, and I think people should be able to watch RT, but the guy's a complete liar. And when people stick up for these communist governments, um, there's a price to pay for being ideologically pure. If I was an ideologically pure libertarian, people would look at me like a complete idiot, because a lot of the real world problems that people need to deal with, you need to apply practical approaches to them. You cannot have a completely lawless medical system, a healthcare system. You can't have an absence of laws in it. You can't govern the medical procedures and everything by the NAP. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, you're right. And actually, what I find is a little bit funny too is when we're talking more about the left wing of politics, is that I find that a lot of times they'll say things and do things that are completely against, that are completely hypocritical to what they actually want. Like a great example that I have is a sign that Antifa time and time again has, who are pretty much the foot soldiers of the communist movement, is that you'll see them. They'll have this the signs that say "Become ungovernable," but really they have signs that say "Become ungovernable." But it oh, 1 second, okay, Bold? Just give me a second.
Yeah, go ahead. I can fill in if you want to go. I see a comment from Augusto Pinochet. Caleb Maupin has Lionel completely bamboozled on socialism. I remember there was one thing that Lionel keeps saying, and I don't watch the stream that often anymore because a lot of it is repetitive. And the thing that and we'll get right back to Adrian, but the thing that he used to say was, well, if you think communism is so inefficient, look at how China is doing. I'm reading right now, and I've read about him before, Deng Xiaoping, who is the person who he was the person after Mao's successor, and that was the person who pulled China out of the failure of communism, because he introduced a more market-friendly system. Communism in China since Deng Xiaoping meant that the government gets to decide who's able to open a business, but you can still open a private business. And that's the only communism that they have there. It's not communism as is practiced by by purist regimes. The ones that are the ones that Mao would have approved of. He was basically betraying the Maoist belief system. In fact, Albania, which was the only other Maoist country at the time, renounced China because of it. And people have to accept the fact that the only reason China is such a huge economic engine is because they mixed totalitarian, government with basically allowing, the least amount of basic safety standards and basic environmental protections in their country. So essentially, it's communism in terms of mindset, but it's not communism in terms of the economic distribution of wealth. In fact, on the contrary, China's middle class is growing, but their poor are just as miserable as they ever have been. And that's why it's not enough to believe in capitalism and a free market and private property. You have to believe in individual freedom and the society based on a Bill of Rights or another or some other charter that's comparable that enshrines those and protects the individual. And China does not believe in that. It never has. What were you going to say, Adrian?
Well, in commenting about China too, I think one thing that helps make their market more successful too is what I think they did a little differently compared to a lot of the other communist countries. Is the other communist countries seem to just want to nationalize everything and take control of it and put it underneath the regulation of the state. But China, a lot of their companies is also an extension arm of the government. So the whole point is also to spread Chinese influence. So they have actually a double investment in their markets. So I think that's one reason. But the what I was going to say, which sorry, my wife just woke up, kind of was running around for a second, so I thought something had happened. But anyway, yeah, what I was going to say is a lot of left-wing governments and a lot of left-wing people, they tend to say a lot of things that are against what is would actually their policies is, because I think of Antifa and how they walk around with these signs that say become ungovernable. Meanwhile, they're pushing for bigger government, but they're presenting themselves as if they're some sort of anarchists with the black hoods and everything, and we don't like our current society. We need to tear it down. But anarchists want no government, while they're saying, "Oh no, we want government. We just want a much bigger government in a way that we want." And then they'll also present themselves as being very peaceful. Yet again, you go look at somebody like Antifa or these groups, and they're prepared to use in a more for ones that aren't so extreme, they'll hit you with more verbal abuse. They'll try and tear you down as a person and call you scum, pieces of shit, and whatever else they want. But when they get more extreme, then they'll actually use violence. So they try and act like they are the moral high ground. They try and act like they're the one that is up for debate and is up for it's all the right wing violence. But I noticed that even when I still consider myself on the left, but was starting to notice the problems, I was starting to see that a lot more of the violence was coming from the left wing of politics. And at first, I was just trying to sort of call attention to it, but then I just decided to abandon the left altogether. And also, some things that I saw that I realized were probably better off, that like the more right wing of politics had it better on. I mean, as I started paying more attention to it, and I thought to myself, does the government really solve many of the problems that we have in society? And my answer was actually no. But meanwhile, there were times in my life where I was advocating for bigger government, or we need to give them more regulation over this or that. But time and time again, they prove that they can't do it, or they're really bad at doing it. And I think it's inevitable, because when you have so much to worry about at one time, you can't really put too much time and effort into every single topic, every single organization, every single industry. So this is why I've actually moved into more believing that the privatization is the better way of doing things these days.
Yeah, I would say that the one area where I remain not as libertarian as other people is the issue of conservation of natural resources, and or of natural for example, saving wildlife, saving nature preserves, things like that, not contaminating water, that type of thing. You do need protections, and I think that everybody has to one degree or another. There's an area where they think that the government has to be entrusted with safeguarding the interests of the public at large. But in many cases where they're for example, with utility companies, things got. I was just reading today about Arkansas Light and Light and Gas, where the Clintons were involved. Not to I don't want every show that we do to be about the Clintons, but that's an example where it got corrupted, and that was a monopolistic utility. It might have been private, but there are plenty of examples, where you have a public utility that is owned by, for example, we have Cleveland Public Power here, which is basically dysfunctional and antiquated. They can never update their facilities, and they always seem to lose their money. It just disappears, and that's what happens. Welcome, Jeffrey Johnson. And in Nicaragua, which we're going to move topics soon, we're going to get to a couple of the other ones. For example, the Red Hen. I don't know if you heard about that
Yes.
incident,
Yep.
Adrian, but we're going to finish up with Nicaragua really quick. Um, it says here, violence in Nicaragua has already reached 200 deaths, according to a non-governmental organization. Now, unfortunately, this is from Deutsche Welle, which is a German publication. So, I always say this: don't trust every single source of media that you read, but at least read through it and see what you can gather out of it. It says certain neighborhoods of eastern Managua, the capital of Nicaragua, have been attacked this Friday by the national police and paramilitary allies, according to um, several witnesses that have been on social media and activist reports. Now, okay, so you have to caveat that these people could be biased. Okay, so let's not assume that they're telling the truth, but let's investigate. In the videos, you may be able to see members of the security forces that um, they basically what do you call it when you ride the rope down? Rappel down from trees. They rappel down from trees or walls in order to fire at a certain person that appears in the streets. Um, so similar stories come from the cities of León and Nagarote in the northeast, or no, in the northwest, and also from Nindiri. So you have all these cities, and so people are trying to say this is the argument I'm getting from people. First of all, how dare you report on this story? America fucked up Nicaragua in the 80s, so you have no right to talk about it. Even though I was, when this was happening, I was like -5 years old. So I'll talk about whatever I damn pleased. And also, America is not involved in Nicaragua in the same manner as it was in the 80s. So therefore, there's no excuse for this. The idea that countries are able to abuse their citizens because in the past the country as a whole was abused by third countries such as the U.S. or I don't know. Let's throw out another country, Namibia. Let's say Namibia had occupied another country for 5,000 years or whatever, and then 10 years later, that country is free and they're shooting all their people. What are they supposed to do? So you're basically giving them a free pass to point at Namibia and say, no, it's because the Namibians made us like this. That's not the way rational people approach analyzing events in a country. It's just not true. You have to, I am not telling people to advocate for intervention in Nicaragua or in any of these other countries in Latin America that I happen to sample news from or study. Whether it's Ecuador or whatever, Ecuador, Venezuela. I don't believe in intervention. In fact, in Venezuela, I don't believe intervention can work because the fact is that, let's say the United States was to invade Venezuela. Well, Venezuela owes all of that money to China, and that money must be paid. So I say, I'm sorry. The unfortunate truth is that China will get Venezuela, and nothing you can say about it. And it's unfair for the Venezuelans, but how can you tell China, you should forgive this debt because Venezuela is doing all these projects to help the poor people? By the way, they're also starving entire cities, and people are basically packing up en masse and moving across the border to Colombia, which has been a war zone for much longer. So people are fleeing to a former war zone that's been basically ravaged for decades because it's comparatively better than a country that's never been at war. That's how ridiculously failed Venezuela is. And then they say to me, "You should shut the fuck up. You're shilling for the CIA." What does the CIA have to do with this, or the IMF? Because Venezuela wasted all their money, screwed their own oil company. There you go, a public utility, basically non-functional, and they owe all this money to China. I'll say whatever I damn please. Jim, so how about we move to the topic of the red hen? What did you hear about this story? Is it making international news already?
I haven't heard anything in the media about it, but I did see they making the rounds on Twitter. This is about Sarah Huckabee Sanders being thrown out of the restaurant, just because of the fact that she's the press secretary.
Indeed, and let me see where I have it. The red hen. No, I don't want to play this one. So I do have the Yelp reviews here, and they're pretty funny. Because they got Yelp bombed, which I don't think is a fair way to attack a business. I think it's kind of deceptive, but I'm not going to govern the ethics of the internet. I think the internet has done well without me, and it will continue to prosper regardless. So these Yelp trolls basically went to the website of or the Yelp page for Here you see like a dick and balls in the shit, that. Yeah, I don't know if you can see that one, but yeah, this sort of sandwich with bacon, or is it pastrami in the shape of a dick and balls, flaccid as well. So it's extra unappetizing even for people that would desire such a package. In any case, I think that this is the best example. We're going to see, I'm predicting, I could be wrong, that this could be a case of market justice. What's your impression of this? What do you think is going to be the outcome for this business over in Lexington, Virginia?
I'm actually I'm not 100%. I guess it kind of like I'm not sure what sort of what sort of side of the spectrum that they fall on in Virginia. Would that be a left wing, a Democratic state?
What's that? Yeah, Virginia, you're saying in terms of political disposition?
Yeah, are they considered more of a left wing or I guess a Democratic state?
So I was looking at the map yesterday of the state itself, because the it's not as simple as saying whether the state is liberal or not, because in every state, this is how it works. I don't know if it works the same way in other countries, like in other provinces of Canada, for example. Let's say in Alberta, maybe Calgary is more liberal and the rest of the state is more conservative, or Edmonton. But but in Virginia, if you go to the northeast corner of the state, we have a person a lot of us watch. His name is Anthony Logan, who comes from Virginia, and he said, well, apart from the Washington D.C. metro area, northern Virginia, much of the state is very conservative. You have Richmond, which is the capital, which is very democratic, and then you have the Virginia Beach area, Norfolk, and all of that, which is a high Afro American population. A lot of them vote Democratic, but this city happens to be situated in the Shenandoah Valley. And for those of you that don't know, that's like kind of closer to the Appalachian range. It's more, country meets, historical areas, Civil War areas. Very nice part of the country. But the city itself, Lexington, happens to have Washington and Lee University, as well as the Virginia Military Institute. So you have a liberal arts college, which probably would have more people that lean left, and then you have a military institute, which, let's assume some of those people are conservative. I don't know. You can't assume anymore, because there's plenty of people in both camps that they defy expectations. But the fact is that when I looked at the county, it voted 69% for Donald Trump, and when I looked at the city itself, which is an independent city, the city of Lexington, they voted about 65% for Hillary Clinton. So they took a real gamble there. I think these owners.
Well, I think it's going to be kind of hard to tell what the outcome of that will be. But I think when I'm looking at this whole situation, because this is sort of, we have these situations where people are getting thrown out simply because of their politics or small other reasons. I mean, we have Tommy Lauren that had something similar happen to her. She pretty much got ran out of a restaurant maybe a month ago. And then we had the whole Christian Baker in that case that got ruled. And for me, I really think that any private restaurant, any private industry should be allowed to kick out anybody that they want and be allowed to serve anybody of choosing, because it's probably the most fair way to go about it. I mean, if you want to kick somebody out if you want to kick somebody out because you just don't like their politics, it is your private establishment. I think they should have the right to do that, because then you're also not getting bogged down in these pointless court cases. But actually, funny enough, this was actually one beef that I had with Mark Dice one time, because one time, it literally in like a 2-minute interval, he was bitching about the Christian baker who is like being forced to bake a cake for the gay couple. And then like 2 minutes later, he's bitching about a guy who was wearing a Donald Trump hat that got kicked out of a restaurant because he was wearing a Donald Trump hat. And it just seems like to me like he wanted best of both worlds. He wanted his no pun intended, he wanted to have his cake and eat it too. which was like he wanted people to be kicked out that he doesn't agree with, and then he also wants people to be able to stay that he agreed with. So this is one thing that I actually kind of stopped watching Mark Dice over, just because I thought he was being very inconsistent in a small time frame. He also kind of annoyed me. But which is why I actually think that anybody, as long as you're in a private establishment, it's your own and it's not like a government institution or a subsidized area. I think anybody should be allowed to refuse service to anybody that they want.
So I think in terms of the rules, I think we're on the same page. I think a lot of people are on the same page in terms of that, and a lot like the people who are writing these Yelp reviews. I kind of, some of them. Here's a bird eating vomit, for example. Here's a piece of shit on a plate. It's funny. But it's not. It's not the way I would go about it. And here's what I'm saying. Okay, so when I did my reaction yesterday, which by the way I put on Reddit, and a lot of people did like it on Reddit, and I think I was surprised because I put it on a Reddit thread that is very partisan, pro right wing, but I didn't get many,
PR
people.
Donald?
Yeah, and I might try putting some on some other subreddits, see how that works, because look, I think Sarah Huckabee Sanders, she knows her job is to take flack for the president. Also, I think she's getting much worse treatment than other press secretaries in the past, because certain people think, well, you deserve it because you happen to work for the president that they consider, the Antichrist, if they would even believe in a God. These are people, they won't believe in a God, but they'll believe in an Antichrist, and they call him Donald Trump. But at the same time, I think, yes, the restaurant manager, she has the right. She has the right to kick people out of her establishment. And I saw Ryu Shiska put in a comment earlier. I'll get back to it. So I hope he doesn't think I'm ignoring him. But, I was listening to Adrian here, and I think we agree on it, that she has the right to expel this woman from the restaurant. The fact is, though, that one of her employees did tweet about it as, in a gesture of pride, obviously, and then I believe that the manager or the owner herself then spoke to the media publicly and said she would do it again. So she is inviting the scorn of the public that does not like her upon her, and it's not right for people to threaten the business. The people putting these Yelp reviews, they're funny, but you're ruining the website itself, and that's a price people are going to have to pay, because here's a rat burger, and these are pretty funny. I don't know if you're looking at this. I don't know if you can look at it, Adrian. Here's the dick
No, I'm just
bacon
listening to what you're
again.
saying.
What's that?
I said no, but I'm just listening to the descriptions you're giving.
No, you got Obama eating a dog. You have, people really got creative with this, and I understand it's fun. I troll too. I don't think I don't think this is the best way to go about this, but that's me. But I'll tell you what I think will happen, and this is based on. Adrian, have you worked at restaurants before? A lot of people have, obviously, because there's a lot of restaurants.
Fast food. I worked at fast food restaurants, never an actual sit-down restaurant.
So yeah, I've worked mostly in sit down. I worked in about three back when I was obviously in school. So the objective when you work at a restaurant, if you're the owner and the staff, is to get as many people to sit down, order a lot of drinks, whether it's soft drinks or and I was never in a place that served alcohol, but, order a lot of the things that you can make money from really quick and don't take a lot of effort. And in this case, what they should have done, in my opinion, was let her sit there, eat, pay her bill, and then when they leave, say, look, I don't want you to come back. I don't like you, for whatever reason it is. And that would have been the best outcome possible, because instead what they did was, and again, we're saying that they're entitled to it. What they said was basically, if you don't fit the standards of our customer base, you don't belong in this restaurant. Okay, so rightly or wrongly, that's the perception that the public will receive. So if people, they remember, you're talking about rural Virginia, if they're driving through and they find out about this restaurant, and they're wearing like a flannel shirt and like beat up torn jeans, and they just came back from the shooting range, or they just came back from what's another thing that rednecks do? They came back
Fucking
from.
their sister.
Yeah, exactly. And the sister is hungry. So that I'm not beating up on people from Virginia or West Virginia or anything, but people who believe that they are being demeaned because of their country heritage, or the fact that this is Virginia and they're the sons of the Confederacy. They don't even have to be like pure country bumpkins, because there are plenty of people who are Southerners who are educated and know a lot. There was always a Southern aristocracy, and they're going to take this to mean we are not welcome. And therefore, what's going to happen is that the surrounding county, I think it's called Rockingham County in Virginia, and you can look at my video from yesterday about this. Those people they're not going to go to the restaurant, and the people who the worst cases are going to be. I said this: the worst case for a restaurant is not even customers who don't come. That's a bad thing. But the customers who do come and then they dine and dash, or they sit there for 2 hours and they order a lot of bread or something, and the customers that are the problem people. That I think initially you might get a few people that come in order to emphatically show support for the restaurant, because they agree they hate Sarah Huckabee Sanders. It's their right to do it. It's their right to order the food or whatever. That's not a sustainable model, because eventually those people have to go home. A lot of these people writing these reviews, the positive reviews, somebody from Chicago, Illinois wrote a review yesterday. Somebody from Cedar Park, Texas. Somebody from El Segundo, California, Philly, Pennsylvania, or whatever. These people, it's very unlikely that they shopped at this restaurant, which I think there might be a photo of the outside. Well, it's not here, but it doesn't look to be very, very big. So it's not likely that those people actually visited the restaurant in the in a timely manner surrounding this event. So a lot of these positive reviews are just as fake as the ones where you have a dick and balls on a bun with lettuce and tomato.
Well, the thing is, too, is these people are forgetting a few of the most basic principles of business, which is number one, you need customers to come in the door. So if you're going to alienate a bunch of your own customers simply because of a reason like that, then you're not getting the business that you need. And also, one of the most crucial things is that they say that 9 out of 10 customers who have a good experience will not take the time in order to write a review or tell you that they had a good experience. But most customers who have a bad experience will take the time in order to tell you that they had a bad experience. So all these people that show up initially for their support, well, number one, I'm sure they do actually support the restaurant, but they're coming in also sort of for their own self-esteem, like their own self-importance. Like they come in, they eat the restaurant once, like, yeah, I came in, I support that restaurant. But the next day they've done their piece. They're not going to be going back there every day in order to eat there to make their point. But then everybody else who has just felt alienated by it, they will remember that and they will not go there anymore. So you've just really screwed over a lot yourself. I mean, this has been the problem that they've noticed whenever companies get involved, when they say that the companies that go full blown social justice, is the fact that they actually end up getting less. They start losing out on profit, and they start doing worse simply because they got political. People don't come to establishments like that for politics. Like if they go to a restaurant, they just go because they want to eat. We can look at what ended up happening to the NFL last year when they started getting political. It's like, well, we're going to take a knee because America's really racist, or we don't like our president. Well, people who most of the people who were there to watch football are sports fans, people who had been working all day and all they wanted to do was relax and watch their favorite sport. I mean, I'm not much of a sports fan. I like hockey, but I don't really watch much else. And even then, I only watch hockey every now and then. But they all they want to do is they're coming in order to get their entertainment. That's the whole idea for the sport. But as soon as you start doing that and you're trying to shove a narrative down their throat, people start getting pissed off, because that's not what that's not what they want with whether it's their food or whether it's their entertainment. So people are going to tune out. People started going to watch baseball instead, as an example, or any other number of sports that are out there. And it's the same thing when we're talking about a restaurant. Restaurants are a dime a dozen, and that's being generous. So if they don't want to, if they go to they're worried about going to the Red Hen and not fitting in. That's fine. Well, we can just literally walk a block over, and then there's another 6 restaurants over there, probably just as good. So we'll go eat there instead. So all this restaurant did was shoot itself in the foot. And if they, you know what, chances are, what were the chances that she was probably going to come back there? I mean, if she was a regular customer, they would have known by now, but she probably wasn't, which means she was stopping in once. So if they just let her eat and let her leave, they probably never would have seen her again, and then it would never, this wouldn't be a big deal. Now it's made international headlines, and not for a good reason.
Yeah, yeah, you could get, and this is why, I don't have a problem with people. I mean, I'm not gonna say I don't have a problem. Like you said, people have a right to deny service. Even I think this is a little less justified than the cake dude, because the cake dude said, "I'll sell you a cake. I just don't want to make a cake for a gay cake or whatever, so, some sort of shit." And he could just say, "Look, I respect you guys. I don't believe in gay marriage." And he also he made a point saying, "I don't make cakes for Halloween because I believe it's a pagan holiday." And he was a Christian. He said up front. And by the way, I think he had a reputation around the community as a reasonably courteous person who just didn't. He didn't make cakes for certain things that violated his religion, for example, strip clubs or whatever. I personally, let's say if there's a Muslim store somewhere, we have a Muslim market on the way downtown here. Obviously I don't agree with the religion of Islam. I'm not going to go in there and harass the owner about his religion because I don't care that much. I have a disagreement on certain grounds with the religion of Islam, and I can live with it, and I hope they can live with my disagreement too. But Ryu Shiska said this. He says, "I say they should pay some black people to go protest their place against their racist against white women." I don't know what he meant by that, but it kind of reminded me of an idea that might happen. Um, there's going to be a lot of people, because this is famous, who are not political, who will try to pull stunts just to fuck with the owners of the Red Hen. And that's the reason, and I'm going to get back to the Trudeau thing, which I don't think I told you, is that, there are a lot of people who they have liberal beliefs or progressive beliefs or whatever. Some people are conservative too. They become, all righteously indignant because they get very, I would say, abrasive responses from people who tell them, these are people that they live in polite society, and they make a statement, and then a lot of people jump on them and tell them to go fuck themselves. And they're like, what did I do? I was just making a statement of my beliefs. Well, they don't understand that the society's opened up a lot in the past 20, 30 years because of the internet, that you get all of the crazy, the bats in the dark are able to swamp over. I mean, look at our chat. I mean, if you look at it, these people are friggin', they're hooligans, right? And I want them here because I like the way that they throw in these topics. They kind of inspire us all, and we get to fuck with them back. But the issue is that they don't understand. The Red Hen owners don't understand that you're gonna get people probably doing things to your customers' cars, and I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying it will probably happen. You're going to get people calling in, making crank calls, doing dine and dashes. That's what happens when you make a big stir and you get into the media or whatever. It happened to that David, the person who's let's call him Sebastian Swine, the person from Florida, who he was in the incident with the I believe the what would you call them? The mops, the mop accident down in Florida. So that
The gentle
person,
kisses.
what?
The gentle kisses.
Yes, yeah. I mean, let's not get too macabre about it, but this person, he makes a huge spectacle out of himself, and he does, for what was initially a very, tragic circumstances, and you can make a very good, commendable cause out of it, and he didn't. He made himself into an obnoxious symbol of basically craftivism, and somebody swatted his house. And the person who did it, it turns out, was a juvenile kid who doesn't care about politics. He's not pro-gun. He's just an asshole. So who do you blame then? I mean, you have to blame yourself. And this woman is
You blame
probably
the phones.
right. Yeah, you're gonna have to blame AT&T, I guess,
Hey,
because
we're using
look,
his logic here.
yeah, the issue here is, you go through life, you do the most things that you can to make it better for yourself and the people around you, and that's not what the red hen people did. They really shat the bed on this one, and I think eventually my prediction is they're going to have to close the restaurant and move away and open a different one somewhere else under a completely different we'll call it the big blue cock or something. That's going to be the new name. So, and you see here, this is a review from Yelp, which I don't know if it's real, but it could be. And this is a very unusual one. It says, as one who was globally discriminated against for being transgender in '86, 3 years ago this month, at Tempe Tavern, I understand the stigma attached to being shamed publicly. Not a Trump supporter, but what are you thinking? You just alienated half of your customer base. That's really bad business. If it wasn't a political gathering and she has a job to do, are you going to kick out all those who identify as Republican or have Trump bumper stickers on their cars? Once you use litmus tests on whom you serve, you've doomed your customer service ratings and your business forever. The red hen laid a blue egg. Treat people as you would like to be treated. All humans, regardless of ethnicity, creed, size, shape, manner of dress, hairstyle, economic status, sexual orientation, gender identity, or political leanings, deserve to be treated equally. I hope you'll apologize and learn that valuable lesson in civility. That happens to be, let me see here. So this is what this person looks like. You can't see them, can you, Adrian? But it's basically this dude looks like basically he could have been like a linebacker. He probably could have been, you know, Randy Johnson of the Arizona Diamondbacks era. But with stage 3 cancer, sorry to, I mean, I just noticed this. And then this is in 2015. This is what this person looks like. And everybody can think of an example. I remember one time I was looking for work in Israel. I walked into this coffee shop, and I was about to ask for work. I noticed that the person there, they yelled out, they're like, "Hi, welcome," and I just turned around and left. Basically, I was like, I'm not gonna be able to work here. Fuck it. I'm like, I'm not gonna be. I just turned around and left, and I didn't even say a word. I'm like, I just left. It was probably, and I don't feel guilty because it's true. I probably would have been the biggest jerk off ever. So, some people are good people, and some people are. It's very hard for them to be good to other people. Now, this transgender person, I think, made a very good point about not just about being a good person, but about being a smart business person, which in some societies is a little better than being a good person. Um, Jeffrey Allen Johnson, yeah, I'm not going to read that, but that's a good observation. Um, you don't have to leave bold like a leopard. Just ask for a go cup. No, I was going to ask for a job. That's what I'm saying. So I didn't have money for a cup of coffee. I think I already drank coffee that day or something. I wasn't going to buy a cup of coffee when I just had some. Um, so yeah, this red hen thing is fascinating in my opinion. It's almost as fascinating as the other topics we went over because it's not as bloody as Nicaragua, obviously, where there are 200 people dead, and yet the media doesn't give a shit here. You could have people basically drowning, in droves over there from a natural disaster, and they wouldn't care either because they love this tension. They love the conflict of it all. Um, Let me see. Do we have any other topics to talk about?
I don't know offhand,
Oh,
actually.
there
It
was
was Nick.
Angela Merkel.
Oh,
You know
yes.
what's going on with her, right?
Looks like she's been getting a lot of pushback from the German population, for a lot of her policies.
Yeah. The fact is that she probably will she's not going to be in power for much longer because I've done a couple of um, streams on this already, where the recent Italian election has basically made the EU a complete and total um, failure in terms of being able to administer itself anymore, because the Italian government is led by a number of people who they're tired of having immigrants come to their country, and they don't care about being nice about it anymore. You have Matteo Salvini, who is basically, he'll go anywhere, he'll tell anybody to go screw himself. He's basically like the Italian version of Howard Stern or something. And he was elected, and now he's interior minister over there. He's turning boats away, and he's saying, we'll do whatever we can to get these people not to come here. And now the Alternative for Germany, which is the third largest party in Germany, is threatening to basically eat into the majority of the conservatives. There's going to be an election in Bavaria later this year, similar to the situation that you had in Ontario, that people were looking at Ontario as a barometer. I don't know if it's true. Maybe I'm wrong. But they were looking at Ontario as a barometer for what's going on in the rest of Canada. And, basically Ford plowed through the Liberals, and they're concerned that because of the Merkle immigration policy, the Alternative for Germany is going to do the same thing to the ruling Union coalition. Do you see any parallels between that and your situation in Canada, Adrian? Do you believe that what happened in Ontario does project on the attitude of a lot of Canadians towards national politics? Not just in Ontario, but let's say in British Columbia and Manitoba and the other provinces, maybe in the maritime provinces, or is it really reading too much into the situation?
I think you could definitely make a few comparisons there for sure. Look, it's still a very different situation talking about Europe because of maybe not as different as I thought, actually. I mean, for them, they've been dealing with the migrant crisis for a while, so I think it was inevitable that something like this was going to rise. But yes, when we're talking about what's going on over here, definitely, I think it's sort of showing what is to come, because for a long time, my province, Ontario, was a stronghold for the Liberals, and that was completely destroyed. Like, blow through them may even still be an understatement. I mean, they went from 55 seats down to 7, which means they don't even have official party status anymore. So that was a pretty big blowout. And then there was just a by-election within last week in Quebec, which was another Liberal stronghold. That one got completely destroyed. So I do think we're having a shift in momentum now towards more conservative parties over here. I think Quebec is also, they're starting to vote for, if it's not the Conservatives, it's another center-right party over here. So there's definitely is starting to be a transition now from what it was. And I do think that actually our own migrant crisis is starting to wake people up to that, because people don't like what is coming out of it. I mean, probably one of the big ones was within the last month or two in Toronto. We've watched as the homeless shelters over there, they've been having so many more people that are now going into them that are all migrants. Like, now it's to the point where there are more illegal migrants in a Toronto homeless shelter than there are homeless citizens. So people are probably starting to notice that. They're seeing how their tax money is getting spent on that. The government's starting to give out emergency funds to these cities, so that way they can help with the influx. And I think there was another point I was going to make. Oh yeah, and then things got so bad in Toronto that the local government, the municipal government, was actually in an article, I think, for the Toronto Star. They were saying that they were asking citizens to open their own homes to these migrants that were coming in because they didn't have the position to. I'm like, literally let them come stay in your home. So people are not very happy with how it goes. They've also noticed that the government has done next to nothing to stop it. I mean, anytime we see pictures coming out of there, we literally have the cops that are carrying people's luggage across, like helping them get across the border. And like they're selling them, like if you watch the videos, you can see them being told like, you know, stop, if you come over here, you're going to be arrested. And then when they do cross, they say you're under arrest, sort of thing. But then the next time you see them, they're literally carrying these people's children, these people's luggage across the border for them. Or, you know, well, at least they've already crossed the border, but they're carrying it to them towards their vehicles or towards the camps there. And people have watched as like literally slums are getting set up along the border now. Like there was emergency during this last summer, they were having tents all there, and then they had to spend a lot of money when the winter months was coming because wintertime people can't be living in tents. It would be way too cold. So they're just watching as nothing is being done about it. And the narrative that gets pushed in a lot of these countries, including my own, is that if you're not accepting them in, well, then you're a bigot, you're a racist. And in a lot of ways, they're making a lot of citizens feel like second class citizens in their own country. So I think when everyone's watched this happen, they're starting to have a shift in how they believe, and this is even going on in some groups. I remember like there was an article about a German feminist who was a public figure, and she was one of the main people, one of the main people from one of the groups that was encouraging people to take in the migrants during the migrant crisis in Germany. And then couple of years after the fact, her article was talking about how she was wrong to do that, and that she was actually thinking about moving to, I think it was Hungary, because Hungary wasn't taking on any of the immigrants there.
Yeah, I think it
And
was a Swedish woman, maybe.
maybe it was either Swedish or Germany or German woman. But yeah, she was like full out getting ready to leave the country over it. So people are starting to see what's happening. And even though the media over here doesn't really report on it, people see what's coming out in Europe right now. They see that they hear the stories, whether it happens to be like the rape gangs in the UK, but Tommy Robinson is getting arrested for being outside the courthouse there, or they hear about all the everything that's going on. So I think people are just getting sick and tired of it and realizing that these governments aren't actually working for the citizens' best interests, but are just working in order for the next vote and trying to make themselves look as good as possible. And and a lot of the times they're trying to, in countries such as my own, which is like the multicultural countries, they present it this way because they know that things like the white vote is starting to become, as you water down the demographic, it becomes less and less important. So they could sit there and say that all they want, meanwhile pandering to the new voters that are going to come in. And, you know, once they get their permanent residency or get their citizenship, who can actually go out and vote, then they'll vote for them. Actually, one thing that I was also seeing too was that a lot of immigrants that do come in, they then get put into swing ridings over here. So ridings that are sort of teeter totter between conservative and liberal. And that generally means that they'll lean more towards the left wing of voting, which means it goes from a conservative riding towards a liberal riding. So the more I look at it, it just seems it's much more about the votes. And I think people are starting to wake up to those facts.
Yeah, we have Larry was a little confused who you are because apparently you know you've had your camera off the whole time, but he thought you might have been somebody thought you were Arjun, so I think it's kind of funny, but
Arjun,
um,
I don't have that accent.
right. I don't know who the no somebody was asking, you know, who is the they thought just my stupid opinion was the Indian guy, but I mean we've had you on like 7 or 8 times on this stream, so I don't
I don't
know.
have Arjun's accent.
Yeah, that's like I mean, and I don't know, maybe they're just trolling both of us here, but
Maybe.
in
I
any
wonder at
case.
this point.
In any case, I did want to touch on. So we've talked a lot about immigration all over the and you know Ryu Shiska also brought up Article 13 of the EU, which I'm not going to say a lot because I didn't want to get through my argument about Canada with somebody last week. So Article 13, I'm not as concerned as some other people are about it because I think that it isn't. First of all, somebody said, I think it was Ryu Shiska, that it's a UK regulation. I believe it's actually an EU regulation. And what I think will happen is that unfortunately for the EU, they're already turning the keys to their own demise. There's already talk of expelling Hungary from the EU. there will probably end up being a number of other states in Eastern Europe that will probably say, well, there's diminishing returns here. There's first of all, Europe continues to have this stupid relationship with Turkey that doesn't make any sense, where Turkey is in some ways considered a future member, and in other times people are like, well, we're not really going to let them in. Well, then why do you keep saying you're going to do it? So Europe, I believe, first of all, the UK has left, and the economic engines of Europe are going to basically start to be the next ones. First of all, Italy is already making major motions that it's going to basically stop doing what the EU tells them to do, and they will probably have an EU referendum. Who knows when, but I think it's going to happen. I'm not going to predict that precisely when it's going to happen. You see what's happening in Germany. What's happening in Spain is just as, first of all, Spain is now housing refugees from this Aquarius migrant boat, and apparently from some sources I've heard, they displaced some students in order to house these refugees. And Spain is going through an upheaval with Catalonia. I've had on 3 times these people from Catalonia, Nuria and this other guy. What was the guy's name? Hernandez. His last name was Hernandez. But in any case, these people, you have these countries. They don't want to be told what to do. The people want a little more local control, just as much as they can get. I think, just my stupid opinion, would agree. Adrian would agree that he wants things that are pertaining to Ottawa to be decided as locally as possible. Not to have them governed by some other part of Canada. And other parts of Canada don't want their affairs governed by Ottawa as much as they don't want to be basically taxed without representation, or told to accept migrants without any feedback or anything. It's not, people want a transparent government. I don't think that's too much to ask. Now, to get back to my argument about migration, and why I was so pumped up about doing this stream, doing other ones, the Red Hat and everything. I had an argument last week with a certain person. Not going to mention his name. Has been on the show. Has been on the show multiple times. And he got bent out of shape because I said, I'm predicting that Justin Trudeau is going to fall apart and he's going to lose because of the migration crisis. And I said that, mark my words, it's going to happen. And he said, no, you don't know what you're talking about. And I said, well, you're deluding yourself. You don't understand what's going on. And then he really got bent out of shape, and he said, no, I know basically the intricacies of Canadian politics. I've studied it for years and years and years, and all the history of it and everything. And I know, and who are you to say this? You who never lived here or whatever. And, I think I would say that I probably triggered a reaction from him. Maybe I was being abrasive. And for that, I think I want to be out of my character. But the fact is that if you look at the way Canada is being managed and what's happening in the rest of the world, Justin Trudeau is going to be left alone to hold the bag for his ridiculous policies. You could see a right-wing government take power in Sweden this year, or possibly a government that's just not quite as left-wing as it is now. But you're seeing a shift away from pro-migration policies all across the Western world. Obviously, in Asia, Asia Pacific, they've never bit the bullet. They always said, well, Japan's going to be Japan, and you can all go to hell. But with regards to Canada, they've believed in a multicultural society, to my knowledge. Okay, I could be wrong, Adrian, because obviously you live there and I don't. And I said to this guy, yes, you do know better because you live there, but I'm observing in a different way than you are. And he's just not, this will be the end of, because this is the way it's going. There's these governments in France, for example, Hollande. He was so henpecked over the immigration crisis that he couldn't run for a second term. You look at countries like Italy that for years were governed by basically a false right-left paradigm. There was the Berlusconi and the Popolo d'Italia, on the so-called right, and then you had the what they call the Democratic Party or the Ulivo on the left. These former communists, but they were both pro-EU globalists. So eventually people had enough and they said, vafanculo. They said, we're going to do a whole new paradigm shift. We're going to go and say, whether it's socialist or pro free market, our government is going to be, serving the citizens of Italy itself, especially people who are, to be fair, Italian speaking, and everybody else can basically suck off. Stronzo. You know, I just said I'm just saying random Italian cuss words here, but the fact of the matter is that this person, he freaked out, and maybe it is because I like this person from the Red Hen who has dipped her foot into basically a whirlpool of hate by putting her own hate in. She doesn't know where it's going to take her. And this person who I argued with, I'm not saying, you can block me, you can do whatever, go ahead. I'm not going to talk to you anymore. But you have to assess Canada for what's happening to it today. You can't assess Canada for what, Mr. Trudeau or his dad or Brian Mulroney, is that how you pronounce his name?
Brian Mulroney, yeah.
Yeah, Mulroney. And then there was, what's the other guy's name? Mario Lemieux,
Stephen
all the
Harper?
important people in Canada. It's gone. What's happening now. I inserted Mario Lemieux because I couldn't think of anybody else. Who's the other guy? Jean Chrétien.
Jean Chrétien, yeah.
Yeah, so you have a lot. Canada did have an illustrious history during that whole pro multiculturalism era, and then they went way, way, way too far, and now they're going to go the other way a little bit. And this immigration crisis is happening there. It's obvious, and this is a person, by the way, who should know a little better because he has a little bit of a background in law and defending individual rights and everything. He should know a little better than I thought he did, and instead he started saying, well, you don't know anything about this, and you're not qualified, and you haven't gone through, you're not educated to the degree that I am, and also, you haven't been through the experiences in the U.S. that I have, or whatever. And it doesn't matter because either you can read the landscape or you can't read the landscape. Your experiences may, they may determine a number of your perceptions, but they don't really reflect the reality on the ground. And that's basically where our differences were. And I don't think I'm going to be hearing from this person anymore. Adrian, do you have any experiences of similar, I would say, tone to what I'm talking about in day-to-day in Canada, or with Americans who are refusing to see this immigration crisis in the same way?
Well, in terms of this buddy that you were talking about and what they were saying, I think they're coming from it from the wrong perspective, because especially when we're talking about something about Canada being a multicultural society, that only started coming in the 80s, and that was actually Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who more or less made that decision for the entire country. It wasn't because he was campaigned on that and people voted him in, but he was already prime minister. And then he more or less made the decision that, well, Canada is now a multicultural society. So take it with a grain of salt when people like to talk about Canada, like how Canadians are all multicultural. I don't actually think it's as many as people think. But we're coming from we're coming from champagne liberals here. So, they like to toot their own horn. And I think that was really what the main thing was about. Also, I think this dude that you were talking to, I don't think he's really sort of taking into consideration the average voter out there, the average person, because I would say most people don't have the interest in politics that we have. They may take some notice to it, but I find that most people tend to not really not really do much about it until about election times coming up. Then they kind of poke their head out of the sand, kind of see where the wind is blowing and sort of see what people are saying, and then they'll sort of go in that direction. But I think that he's not really taking into consideration about the average voter out there. And like the average voter, like Justin Trudeau doesn't actually appeal to him. The reason I think that Justin Trudeau ended up going in and winning this past election was I mean, there's probably a few alternative reasons why, like such as his whole liberalist server, which really gave him an edge over that. But more than that, I think it was because we had 11 years of a conservative government, or just, sorry, not quite. Maybe it was about 10, almost 9. So we had that many years with a conservative government. And I think people were just kind of getting to the end of having Harper in charge. And I don't think that the guy running for the NDP, Thomas Mulcair, really stood out enough in order for people to want to vote for him. Plus, by the end, he was running mostly on a campaign of stop Harper. Like that was his whole call, was just like, really was vote me in so that way Harper doesn't get another term, which I don't think resonated very well. Just maybe at first, but then when people really wanted to hear more of what he was going to do and they weren't hearing it, they kind of just lost interest in him. And I think that was one of the reasons that Justin Trudeau really came in to win it. And what was your question again? I kind of went off on my own little tangent there, and kind of
Yeah,
what was
yeah.
your
You
actual
do
question?
you deal with that kind of pushback because the fact is, this guy got bent out of shape. I predicted, and I still predict that Justin Trudeau is not going to be able to survive. Both for there's reasons that both of us know that we're working on that hopefully that will contribute to him not surviving this next election. However, I think independent of that, he's sort of he's worn out his welcome, and I'm predicting he's not going to win the next federal election. Justin Trudeau. This person got really bent out of shape. He said, "Oh, who are you to predict anything? I've gotten several predictions wrong in the past." He said, meaning himself, including the Trump election. He said he would never have predicted that Donald Trump would have won. And he's saying, well, if I can't predict these things right, how are you to predict these things accurately? And the fact of the matter is, I did predict Brexit would go through. I wasn't quite sure about the Trump election, so I don't think I even made a prediction on that one. But there have been a number. For example, I predicted Italy would be the next country to try to leave the EU, and that's going to happen, I believe. Either that or Hungary is
Yeah,
going to get kicked out. But this person, he kind of flipped the lid because he's like, well, I'm basically doing a lot of this stuff from independent, um, day-to-day scanning of the headlines and reading through a number of studies and statistics and looking at trends and polling and whatever. And it's not like I did a degree on any of this. And I think that he got like miffed about it. And he's like, basically, screw you, because he's been studying Canadian politics for many years, which, good for him. I was going to ask if you have any similar experiences with people from Canada, or maybe if you're talking about the United States, people will tell you to butt out of the United States because, I mean, to my knowledge, you haven't lived here. So do you get that type of reaction ever?
maybe once or twice, maybe like during a Twitter war or something like that. But usually I find it's people that just generally don't like to be told they're wrong or like always have their opinion substantiated. So when someone finally does come along that's not willing to agree with them, they don't take it so well. I think that's probably mostly where it comes from. I have had it once or twice, I think, from Americans when that happened. And I mean, maybe it's just my experience. They always seem to come more from the left wing of politics than anything else. And I'll still get that up here for sure. People who get really bent out of shape when you say something politically that they don't like. And when it comes to people who vote, like he says, like, well, I couldn't predict this properly. Well, no one's going to predict anything 100% of the time. Like you can't ever be always right. So it's going to happen. But what I find too is a lot of people who tend to make these predictions something, they're kind of stuck on their high horse on there, and they generally tend to talk to other people that sort of have the same experience. So they're all coming from their own bubble. Maybe not a political bubble, but coming from an education bubble. And I think that because of that, they don't really I would say people like you and me are a little more down to earth, know what the average person is kind of like. We'd probably be classified more as the average person. So I think in a lot of ways, we're actually in a better position to make these predictions rather than they are. We should probably spend most of their time reading the news and also looking at some statistics. But I even and probably some surveys. But I always question the like surveys, especially because they always tend like they take it from a small demographic and then they say that, well, you know, we've made some changes in order for like population and demographics, you know, so this is a pretty accurate poll or survey, but I always question those. So I think I would actually say that we're in a better position to make these predictions than they are.
Yeah, I think before we close, I don't know what the hell Augusto Pinochet is talking about in the chat, but he's doing a lot. I mean, these guys are doing a lot of monkey emojis or something, so they must be up to something pretty dumb. You know, the finger
Doing
and
some monkey
the
business, are they?
yeah, you know, a lot of like the finger and the OK sign, meaning that I don't know, are they having sex with a bunch of chimps or something?
Maybe,
So,
man.
in any case, I want to correct something. The city of Lexington in Virginia is in Rockbridge County. I got a message on my phone from my previous video where I said Rockingham. So it is Rockbridge County, Virginia, which is, you know, that's the part where, you have a difference between the city of Lexington, which is a little more liberal, probably because of the university and other things there. But it's not that big of a city, so you don't have a huge customer base anyway. But it's not a big restaurant. But then the rest of the county is a lot of really Trump people. So I think it's a bad business decision, and I think it's a rough world. You know, all of us do things sometimes that we give away too much, or we go and overcommit to a viewpoint. And I did burn a bridge last week, but I still think I'm right about this Canadian election. But unfortunately, we're living in a society now where the slightest disagreement can end it can end a working relationship. It can end a good thing going. And unfortunately, that's happening all too often, but it's also creating new relationships and everything. Now, this same person, I sent them the Mattis file, and I said, you should read through it. This is what we do. It's not just talking about the NBA or whatever over here. We try to actually interpret the news and see where we can find things that are false. I mean, I think Adrian does the same thing on his channel as I do. And I think that's the reason that we do need, these venues like YouTube for people to go as kind of a different place to explore the news as opposed to just receiving it as previous generations have. So, Adrian, would you like a last word before we close?
Uh, Yeah, no, and I would just say that also, I guess, as things get a little more polarized in this world, we're going to see more of that because when Trump won the election, we started hearing about a lot of people that were saying that like there were fights between friends and even some families who were starting to pretty much break apart simply because of the fact that Trump won the election or the fact that people disagreed politically. And this is actually also starting to happen over here. I mean, Doug Ford won the election, the provincial election, and there were some people that even I know that have pretty much said like, if you voted for Doug Ford, you might as well like unfriend me now, like on social media and things like that. My wife had a friend over not too long ago, gay guy, who pretty much was like very anti conservatives, and he pretty much went as far as to say that all conservatives are old white religious people, like, and all like racist, homophobic, blah blah blah, like the old stereotypes that we used to hear time and time again. But the one thing I've said about these sort of people is I find that they're very, for the most part, they're either not super politically involved or they're misinformed. Because again, just going from personal experience, there were important issues that came up in this election for us that these people didn't even know about, like this guy one of the so the liberals got trashed, and so that made the the new Democratic Party. They were the new they were the next in line, and they were the ones that were kind of challenging the conservatives for premier. And one thing that they wanted to do was turn Ontario into a sanctuary province. And this guy that my like one of my wife's friends, she like my wife brought that up to him about how they wanted to turn it a sanctuary province. He literally did not know that that's what they wanted, and he had to be explained what a sanctuary province was. Like he had no idea. So this is just sort of like that's why I kind of say that they're misinformed a lot of times, or like their whole campaign is they campaign on disliking the right wing party, but they don't actually know what the left wing party wants to do. So I honestly think though we're going to see more of this because as especially with the left wing parties as they begin to lose out, they're going to double down on this narrative. So I think we've only seen I think this is only actually the tip of the iceberg when we're talking about how divisive politics is. I think it's going to get a lot worse come the next few years.
Yeah, that's something I observe, and it's a good last point to leave on. That I remember one time I was last place I lived in before I lived here. There's a Catholic lady a couple doors away from me that had like the what do you call her? The Virgin Mary in the bathtub thing that they put on the front lawn. You ever see those? The Italian ladies
Oh
have them.
yes, yes, yes. I know
So
what you're talking about.
I'm walking home, and I see this group of teens, and one of them, this is like way before the election, by the way, like has nothing to do with the election either. And this one of the kids is like, she's wearing one of those stupid hoodies with the cat ears, and
Oh
obviously
yeah.
like her hair is like dyed like some sort of ridiculous color. And she's like, yeah, fuck Christianity, that's ridiculous and whatever. And I'm thinking, this Italian lady's hearing from inside her house, these people are still alive. The young people who believe in this sort of aggressively atheistic belief system, the postmodernism, or like you said, that gay guy, or they don't realize that their manner of expression is not actually winning over any sort of they're not winning over people in the middle. That's why I think Dave Rubin, for example, is so successful, because he goes to lengths not to be aggressively confrontational with people, which is an approach that I think has won him a lot of accolades. If I would have, if I would have, if you have told me, like, let's say 8 years ago, that I would be listening to his show, somebody like him, I would have said, I probably wouldn't be interested in it. But he's built himself a major following through that type of good business approach, which is, I think, contrary to what the Red Hen people do. So uh, Adrian, tell people where to find your show.
Well, you can find me right now on YouTube at Just My Stupid Opinion. I'm also on BitChute where I upload everything there. I think the only thing you won't find on there are the live streams because it doesn't upload automatically. But those are the two main platforms you can find me on. Then I just got accounts kind of all around Twitter, Steemit, Minds, so which usually you can find me if you just look in at JMSO Podcast. So you can find me there, and then I'm actually starting to build. I'm trying to start to build a website soon, so eventually I'll have something up on there.
Yeah, keep us updated. I'm doing a lot more stuff on Reddit now. It seems like a very interesting way. I mean, I guess it's still Reddit, but it works. So you can find me, Chef Leopard, on Reddit as well, and a lot of other platforms. We have Carlos in the chat. Welcome. I don't know if he was just listening the whole time or he was stoned in Larry's garage, but welcome anyway. Larry, also have a nice evening. And also, for those of you that you might have missed the beginning, I might be having a debate either tomorrow, that would be Monday, 6:30 Eastern Time, on Halsey News Network, with a gentleman about the Nicaragua situation, or on Wednesday. It's going to be one of those 2 days, so I'll try to update you guys. I don't know how easy it'll be, because apparently nobody got the notification this time. So other than that, have a great evening, and I hope everybody can subscribe, like the video, share the video, comment on the video, and Forza Italia. All right, good night.
All right. Thanks for having me on, Bold.